beautiful animation, compelling story, interesting setting, and complex characters. Long ago, the four elements of a good cartoon were balanced and lived in harmony, thus creating the amazing cartoon, Avatar: The Last Airbender. The show ran for exactly the 3 seasons it was intended to. After the show's disappearance, other cartoons seemed to forget the sort of quality that went into making a show this great, and the cartoon world fell into mediocrity. Only the creators of Avatar, the master of the 4 great animation elements, could come together and bring us another amazing show. They created Korra. Unfortunately, it was severely lacking in one of the 4 elements, thus throwing the other 3 elements out of balance. Fortunately, Korra got greenlit for 4 seasons, so while it might not have been great in season 1, I believe Korra can make a comeback, and become the great show it was always destined to be.
Previously on Pieguy's Opinion, Korra Season 2 was definitely an improvement on the storytelling in Korra Season 1. It also took the characters to more unique locations, and the animation was even more beautiful than Season 1. Unfortunately, it still had its issues, primarily in the department of characters. It got bogged down in an annoying love triangle, and Korra herself still wasn't particularly interesting. Despite this, the show did have some interesting characters in the form of Tenzin and his family. All in all, Korra Season 2 had its fair share of ups and downs, unfortunately ending on what Pieguy considers to be a major blunder, having the characters fight in a very unclimactic and Godzilla-esque way. What will Pieguy think of Season 3?
Hey guys, Pieguyrulz here, and Legend of Korra Book 3 has finally wrapped. I would say it's finished airing, but that would require the episodes actually making it to air. Stupid Nickelodeon decisions aside, I want to talk about the season. Now, this video is going to go in 2 parts. The first part will be a very, very light, spoilery part, and then the second part will be an incredibly spoilery part. Like, I'm just going to talk about everything. For this first part here, the only things I'll be spoiling are things that are absolutely crucial for me to talk about the season. Stuff you'll probably see in the first few episodes, or at the very least, something you'd see in a plot synopsis. That being said, there are significant surprises that happen fairly early on in the season, so if you want to be completely unspoiled, obviously don't watch this. Alright, time for the light spoilery stuff. So, the main plot of the season is that airbenders are now re-emerging, and Tenzin wants to train them and basically repopulate the Air Nation. Now, this all happened because of what Korra did on harmonic convergence and merging the spirit world with the physical world. Doesn't exactly go into how or why, but sure, it makes sense that something spiritual happened, and now airbenders are back. I really didn't see this coming, and I think it's actually a really nice direction to take the series. I think everyone was predicting that this season would be about Korra having to deal with the spirits being in the physical world, and maybe some of them are going to be more mischievous than others, or maybe one will be also evil, just like Vaatu last season. But no, they go with this direction, and I think it is the right direction for the series, and for the universe as a whole. Aang started off his journey feeling guilty about losing the Air Nation, basically, and now Korra is the one helping rebuild it. It also raises a lot of complex questions like, is it alright to take people away from their natural culture to bring them into a culture that they didn't ask for but are suddenly gifted with abilities from? But I think the best part from a storytelling perspective about bringing back the Air Nation is what they can do with the villain. We finally get to see a villainous airbender. How awesome is that? And not just do we get to see him, but he uses airbending to its horrifying potential. But more on that in the spoilery section. And speaking of the antagonists, not only is the airbender in the team really cool, but we get to see all 4 elements being represented by 4 different bad guys all in one team. Yeah, we saw a little bit of this last season with the Dark Avatar, but I don't think they used it to its full potential, not like they're using it here. I remember seeing the triple threat triads back in the first episode and thinking what a cool potential for some bad guys to have a member of the team be each of the different elements. And they never quite delivered on that. They were always very, very tertiary bad guys in the series. But this is on full display, the power of the 4 elements all combined, and unlike last season with the Dark Avatar, each of these people knows how to use their elements to its absolute full potential. This makes the fight scenes in this season seem very different from anything we've ever seen, and each fight scene plays out a little bit differently. Plus, we get to see a ton of really interesting metal bending from the good guys this season. Which brings me to my next point, is that this season isn't just about the airbenders, but it has a lot to do with the Earth Kingdom. We get to see Ba Sing Se again, and a very unique city surrounded in metal. This is really awesome to see because we've had a lot of focus on the Water Nation throughout the course of Korra, which makes sense because she is Water Nation, but the first two big bads of the series were both waterbenders, and they were both unique and different in their own ways, but it's definitely cool to see more from the Earthbenders. Now, to completely shift gears for a moment and tell you about something really amazing. If you started to get fed up with the love triangle-y stuff in Season 2, heck, if you were done with it by Season 1, I can promise you, it is gone in this season. You do not have to worry about it. What they do is at the beginning of the season, they play with it a little bit, just how awkward it is that they all were in a love triangle, but no attempt is made for any of the characters to try to hook up. The closest thing we get is one of Tenzin's kids having a love interest, and Bolin having a love interest, but this time it's actually kind of sweet. So yeah, the love triangle stuff is not only not present this season, but they actually acknowledge how awkward it was and assure the audience that this isn't going to happen again. On the flip side, there is an entire episode that I don't like and feel is pretty much filler. I'll leave it vague so I don't spoil too much, but it's basically about Tenzin training some new airbenders, and it goes through the tired shtick of he's being too harsh on them, he can't relate to them. It's basically a lot of the stuff that we saw with Tenzin and Korra back in Season 1, and even then it was the cliche, I am the authority figure, you have to obey me because what I say is the way things are done, and I have to be strict, and blah blah blah. We've seen this play out a million times before in other shows, and we've already seen it happen here. There's not really a reason for it. I get that they want to show the progress of what's going on, but otherwise it's pretty much completely filler and not very interesting to watch. It's not horrible, but I think I'd rank it even slightly lower than The Great Divide. This is a pretty big departure from Season 2, where the Tenzin episodes that focused on him and his family were by far the more interesting parts of the early season. Now, speaking on characters, Korra and her friends still suffer from loose characterization. None of them feel very strong in their character traits, and Korra, while still taking a big leap in the right direction, still feels not as strong of a character as the lead should. But overall, I'd say without the whole love triangle thing holding them back, they're definitely developing as characters and becoming a lot more likable. So they're on their way. Plus, there's some great returning and new supporting characters. Once again, we get to see Kaya and Bumi, but this time Bumi has a bigger role to play in the story. Also, we get to see some of Lin's relatives and find out a little bit more about her backstory and a little bit about what happened to Toph. We also get introduced to a new airbender who is very, very similar to Aang. Now, don't get me wrong, he has his key differences. I'm not saying he's a copy of Aang, but it's very clear in both his design and his attitude that he's meant to, at the very least, be a very big nod to Aang. And the last thing I'm gonna say, before going into the spoilery section, is that this season has amazing animation. Like, last season had some really good animation too, but this season, everything just seems to be perfect, really. The backgrounds look beautifully detailed, the animation itself is really fluid, and even the CGI seems to blend a lot better this season. If you're a fan of animation, like the art form, you have to watch this season, for no other reason, other than the fact that it's really beautiful. We don't get to see this quality animation outside of theatrical films, and there haven't been many of those lately. So yeah, if you haven't seen this season yet, or even the series, I cannot recommend it enough. I think this season is the best season of Korra.
Do yourself a favor and please watch it.
Okay, so now there's going to be major spoilers. If you haven't seen it yet, please don't watch this part. So I guess the first thing I really want to talk about is the Earth Queen. When she was introduced, I assumed it was going to be one of those things where, yeah, she's a royal, and yeah, she's kind of a jerk, but you know what, we gotta put up with it. But no, they actually kill her. And not just kill her, but kill her in one of the most chilling ways possible, and it's just fantastic. I mean, way back in the original series, when they started to introduce bending, we thought, well, you know, technically speaking, you could probably bend someone's blood or something like that with water bending. Heck, with air bending, you could probably just suffocate someone to death. Both of those things happened later on in Avatar and in Korra, respectively. And I think it's just amazing the amount of restraint Nickelodeon has actually given to allow them to put such a dark plot point in. I mean, yes, Nickelodeon has handled the series very, very poorly, but at least they gave them the amount of money to do this with the really nice animation that it gets, and the freedom, at least somewhat, to tell the kind of story they want. And I really love the way that they framed the death of the Earth Queen and the death of the Combustion Woman. In both cases, it's very clear to the mature audience, yeah, these characters are dead, they're not coming back. and they even say the Earth Queen has fallen. But I'm sure to kids that don't quite understand, they might just think of it as she's incapacitated. It was a very clever way of handling the death scenes in a show that still needs to be somewhat family friendly. And by not showing every gruesome detail of both of these characters' deaths, it leaves more up to the imagination, which makes them all the more horrifying. The next thing I want to talk about is Bolin's story arc with metal bending. He starts off too anxious to even try to learn because he's afraid he won't be able to do it. He's not able to do it, but the show doesn't really dwell on it because other things are going on. Later on in the season, Mako needs him to metal bend them out of the jail, and you think this is going to be his big triumphant moment, but no, he can't do it. And it's very clear he has some anxiety about this issue. When you're watching it, you feel like this is only going to go one of two ways. Either he's going to pull off some miraculous metal bending thing right at the moment that they need it, or he's going to have to realize that he has other talents. Of course, it turns out to be the latter, but not in any way that I expected. I had no idea he was going to start lava bending, although in hindsight, it really does make a lot of sense. It's such a cool revelation, and it comes at such a critical point in the story, and it provides a very nice full story arc from start to finish of him not being able to metal bend, but finally being able to find something amazing that he's really good at. I also love his little story arc with Beifong's niece. I think they have a really cute vibe going on, very much like Sokka and Princess Yue. Most importantly about it is that it's not really played for drama. It's not anything but just a kind of sweet meeting between two characters. So next I want to talk about Zahir and the other bad guys. So their motivation is really that they want anarchy because they think that'll bring about order, and they think that the world's powers, the people in charge, are corrupt. It's not like they're super complex or anything. It's pretty obvious to see how, yes, they come from a realistic place because we definitely see the Earth Queen is a horrible leader. But at the same time, we know that the world needs some form of leadership. What also helps him become a more menacing villain is the fact that he is fairly serious. He's not evil cackle like the Dark Avatar. He is not hammy in any way, shape, or form. He's just kind of motivated about what he wants to do, and he doesn't get any sort of enjoyment out of necessarily ending the Avatar's life. He just thinks it needs to be done for the greater good. We also get to see him have a relationship with Combustion Woman. Yes, that's what I'm calling her. And there's a very brief scene towards the end where we see them have a tender kiss. It's all put in there to show the audience that this guy's a little bit more complex than I'm just evil, rawr, rawr, rawr. They don't need to be amazingly complex. They're intimidating, they have cool powers, and they make for a lot of really awesome fight scenes. So I think the four elemental villains as bad guys really work for the season. And I guess the last thing I really want to touch on is the two-part finale. This thing has a lot in common with the finale of Book 2 of the original show, with a little bit of the finale of Book 3 thrown in for good measure. The ending, while definitely more upbeat, ends with Korra really beaten down and in a disheveled state, not unlike how Aang is at the end of Season 2. And the place where Korra fights Zahir? Yep, you guessed it, rocky pillars.
Not to mention the fact that some of the fighting takes place in a cave that looks conspicuously like the cave in Season 2.
And I'm not saying that these are copies of stuff that the original show did. No, I'm just saying it echoes back to them, probably intentionally. This might be a pretty bold statement, and I'd need to rewatch some things to be sure for certain, but the last two episodes here have probably the best fight scenes in all of the Avatar universe. I mean, we get to see Korra having to fight while handcuffed. We get to see Korra's dad do some really awesome stuff with his watery hands. We get to see Lin and her sister fight together.
We get that really awesome lava fight between Bolin and Ghazan.
And while the fight at the end between Zahir and Korra in the Avatar state is definitely not as awesome as Aang versus Ozai, it is definitely up there. And it's not just the fighting that's awesome about the finale, just plot points in general really work. I like how they decide to poison Korra into getting her into the Avatar state. It actually provides a logical reason why the villains just don't outright kill the main character. And the whole drama of that scene where Korra is staring face to face with the villain she's fought before is really eerie in an amazing way. Definitely builds the tension and definitely has you on the edge of your seat. All in all, I would say that this is a fantastic season, and I truly hope a lot of people get a chance to see this, especially those who are down on seasons 1 and or 2, myself included. I think this definitely makes up for and improves upon all of the flaws we've seen in the previous seasons, and gives me very high hopes for season 4 and possibly whatever other continuation of this universe there is, be it in comic form or, hey, who knows, maybe even another spin-off series. Pieguyrulz, out.